Start recording. So hopefully, yep, people are starting to come in. We'll get started in just a moment, everyone. People are still coming in. And just double checking. Yep. All right, so hello and welcome. Thank you for logging on and attending this afternoon's program. My name is Matt Schumann. I am on the programming team here at Cary Library. Before we begin, if you have any technical issues, please send a message to me in the chat and I can hopefully try to resolve them for you. You can also send any questions that you have for the panelists via the Q&A button. This program, oh no, sorry, I'm greeting. I'd like to now introduce Ashley Rooney. Ashley is a prolific author and the past president of the Lexington Field and Garden Club. With her diverse community interests, having run the library's gardening series all year, and otherwise, we are grateful for her presence in the community. So please welcome Ashley.
Thank you, Matt. I'm here representing Lexington's Town Celebrations Committee, and Veterans Day is coming up. As you can see from our poster, we're going to have a wonderful classic car parade on that actual day at 1 o'clock, right down Massachusetts Avenue and around the green, finishing up at St. Bridget's Church. But before then, we have 3 vets who are willing to talk to us about their memories and motivations, why they went into the service and what happened. So let me introduce Bill Mix, Peter Lund, and Gina Rada. You want to put up their pictures, Matt? There we go. So I thought we would first start out, let me say, with the questions, we can take them right through the program. So I will be monitoring that. So if you have questions for individual speakers, be sure to send them through that button.
Let me just interrupt you for a second. Also, if you are seeing just one person speaking, just click view and go to gallery view, and you should be able to see all 4 people.
Some people don't know where gallery view is, Matt. Do you want to describe that?
It should be in the upper right-hand corner. It's different on every device. If you're using an iPad, it's on the left side. And if you're using a phone, I think you just swipe right or left and it'll eventually show all 4. Okay.
So we're going to start with Bill Mix as our senior veteran of the group. And Bill, why don't we all start off and tell us what service you went into and why you got in there? Bill?
Well, I was in the Army, and when I was first asked about this program, they said, we'd like to ask you about why you enlisted. And I said, I didn't enlist. Oh, you were drafted. No, I was not drafted. Deer in the headlights, and I was not in a National Guard or Army Reserve unit that was called up. I was a 17-year-old graduate from Belmont High School, and I went to Boston University and immediately had to join the ROTC program. And I received my commission through ROTC, and that's how I got into the Army. The reason I selected the Army as opposed to the Air Force was that there were so many people in the Air Force, I didn't think I was going to make it get a commission. And of course, it's always much nicer to enter the armed forces as an officer and a gentleman as opposed to having to be drafted. I was in the Army Infantry.
Interesting. And Peter, what about you?
Well, push came to shove in the summer of 1958 when I was called up for my draft physical. That was between my junior and senior years at Tufts. So got the draft physical, and a number of fraternity brothers and I, we started investigating various services we might be interested in, because we knew we had a military commitment. Like it or not, unless there was a deferment, we were going to go. So we checked out the Navy, we checked out the Coast Guard, and Coast Guard didn't look too interested in it. So finally, by Christmas, we basically had decided that the Navy was the way to go, and that was Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island. So 12 of us in this fraternity at Tufts, 6 of us went in the Navy.
Did you all descend on Newport?
No, I'm getting there.
Oh.
2 were ROTC, okay? And 3 of us went to OCS in Newport, and 1 guy went to AOC, which was Air Officer Candidate School, and that was in Pensacola, Florida. So it was the impetus of the draft that said you got to do something, and I figured a bed on a ship was a heck of a lot better than being in a foxhole. So that was probably the basic motivation. Coupled with the fact, I think we have to put this in a historical context a bit, that we all of us, that being men, had a 7-year military commitment. And basically you could do it any number of ways. There was a 6-month program where, for instance, you could go into the Air Force, do 6 months active duty, and then 7.5 years or 6.5 years, whatever it was, in some sort of ready reserve unit. So if push came to shove, you were on active duty. And I can recall back from college days that when there was a problem in Lebanon in the mid-50s, and we had Korean War vets with us, and there was some little green notes from the Army or the military services saying, be prepared to put your affairs in order because you may be recalled to active duty. So that's sort of the environment, and I think how we were dealing with it.
So what year was that?
Draft physical was 58, summer 58, so 59 was after graduation, we went on to OCS.
Okay.
I went on active duty if you were ROTC. But that was 6 out of 12 of us went Navy.
Went Navy, interesting.
Yeah, I went to work for DuPont. I was draft exempt. He was making gunpowder. And
Okay.
a number of other guys went to either med school or dent school.
Uh-huh. Let's see what Gina did.
I enlisted right out of high school. So I graduated from Malden High in 2002, and I went straight into the Air Force in that following September. I don't think at the time I was quite ready to go to college, and I was exploring my options. My mom had been in the Air Force for 4 years when she was younger. So it was sort of something that she and I had talked about for a little bit. And it sounded like something really exciting and would be a good fit for me. So that's why I did it.
Oh, interesting. What role were you in the Air Force? Were you a pilot?
No, I was an aerospace medicine technician. So it's basically commonly known as a medic is what I was when I was in the Air Force.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So now,
yeah, a lot of people think everybody in the Air Force are pilots, but there's hundreds of different jobs that you can do. So
I had various people in the interviews I've been doing for World War II who said they couldn't get into the Air Force then because of their eyesight. And my first husband couldn't because he was colorblind. Is that still true?
Well, it's been a long time since I took the physical exam to go in the military, but I do think that they screen for that. I don't know if it's a complete disclaimer. It might be for certain jobs and maybe not for others. So I can say for sure.
Yeah, because the Air Force does sound exciting. So let's go to some of your favorite events and memories of your time in the military. Was it a boring grind, or did you have some adventures that you learned more about yourself and about the world and what the world was like, and that you look back and sort of said, that was kind of fun? Should we start again with you, Bill? And what I can ask you, Bill, is what year you went in?
I went in following graduation in 1953.
Okay.
And it was nice to have a choice. I had the choice of going to Fort Benning, Georgia in July, August, or September.
Mhm.
And to go to Georgia in the summertime, I didn't think that was a very great idea. So I elected to go in September.
Right.
I spent a good deal of time at Benning. I didn't leave there until it was middle part of March. However, while at Benning, one adventure was to spend about a week in the Okefenokee swamps.
Oh,
And that's between the border of Georgia and Florida. And the idea was to live off of sea rations for 3 days, and then we would be met by some friendly people who would resupply us for the next 3 days. However, they don't show up.
oh,
And we had with us a fellow who was born and brought up in the Everglades. And so for the couple of days that we did not have any sea rations because nobody showed up, Mother Levitt, as we called them, was doing a great job of making gourmet meals out of rabbit and snakes.
Yeah.
And when we went out for a few problems, what we did was we put him up on a tree and tied him in so he wouldn't fall out because we knew he was going to fall asleep. When we got into Friday of that week, he said, you know, there's a big boar around here.
oh,
And I said, well, how can you tell that? He said, well, you can see the footprints. I said, you can. And anyway, he set up a trap, and lo and behold, we snagged a 450-pound boar.
oh,
We had to call a truce to this whole exercise. We were working with some aggressive units, and we all dug a pit and set a fire, and it took about 24 hours to roast the boar, but that was a very delicious meal.
I bet it was better than snake.
Yeah, it was super great. So that was my time at Benning. When leaving Benning, I was told that I was going to be part of the aggressive forces that were to train National Guard and Army Reserve units at Camp Polk, Louisiana.
Oh.
Now, I said it already, I didn't like the summertime. This is now March, and I was going to be there from May through September. I didn't think that was a very good idea. And being an officer, you've got all sorts of opportunities to do things, and they had a career services branch in Washington. I quickly got off a letter and requested duty in any cold spot that I could think of. Fort Churchill, Manitoba, Canada, the Aleutians, you name it. And they came back to me and said, we have an opening in Keflavik, Iceland. I said, I'll take it. So I spent a year from May of 1954 through May of 1955 in Iceland.
Wow.
And I had
Supposed to be beautiful.
very interesting experiences there. Going to on the troop ship that took us to Iceland, everybody was flying to Iceland, but for some reason I was put on a troop ship. Now, if you were on the Queen Mary, you'd be on the General something or other. I was on the Private Johnson. So you can imagine the size of that vessel. It turns out that there were only 2 Army officers. One was a Green Second Lieutenant Meade, and the other was a captain. But we did have quite a few dependent families with us who were on their way up. We backed out of Bayonne Harbor, and we had an overhanging bridge on the ship, and immediately took off the roof of the shed that was there. And instead of heading north, we headed south. We went to Norfolk, Virginia, and picked up a battalion of engineers who were going to Greenland. Now, these engineers did not have any officers with them. The officers obviously flew. One morning, as we were headed out, I woke up to I had incidentally a very nice stateroom. That goes with being an officer.
Yes.
And there was a chair that was going across the room, bang, 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 from side to side. And I looked out the porthole. I'm laying in bed. I looked out the porthole, and all of a sudden I'm seeing sky, and then I'm seeing water, and it was kind of rough. But I managed to get out of bed, take a shower, went to have breakfast. I'm one that fortunately doesn't get seasick. There weren't too many people in the dining room. However, we were assigned families to sit with, the two of us, the captain and myself. And I was with a family of wife and two kids going up to spend 2 years in Iceland. And it turns out that that was the wife of my marketing instructor at Boston University. He was called up because of the Cold War situation, and he was base personnel officer. Well, I got ahead of myself there. On this morning that we were banging around, it was my duty to inspect the head.
Oh, lucky you.
Where we had the engineers. Yeah. And I'm sitting having my scrambled eggs and bacon and just opening up another cup of coffee when a sergeant came up and, "Sir, could you get down and get our inspection out of the way so that we can use the heads?" And I said, "You go right ahead and use the head. I'll be down later." I wasn't going to disturb my coffee and breakfast. So we finally got to a point off the coast of Greenland, and there we had to discharge all of the engineers. We could not get into any closer than Greenland because of the ice. And while we were doing the discharging of the guys from the ship to these little tenders that were taking everybody ashore, there was a jolt, and a chunk of ice hit the bow of the vessel and just above the water line. So what was to have been a 5-day trip from Bayonne, New Jersey to Iceland under normal circumstances was 15 days via Norfolk, Virginia. And we could not make more than 4 or 5 knots going from Greenland to Reykjavik.
Did the
So
chip light?
that was a long trip. But what was nice about this whole thing, that 15 days counted as being in Iceland. So now I only have to spend 12 and a half months. I mean, 11 and a half months.
Okay, Peter, can you make that story?
I'll tell you about Iceland a little later.
There's a multitude of Navy stories, and what you really have to do is separate the ones that would occurred on the beach, which means on Liberty, and the ones that occurred on shipboard. So we'll not talk about the Liberty side of the street because that's a multitude of rather good stories. We'll talk about the
Little risque.
shipboard side of this thing. I walked aboard a destroyer escort, and it was immediately assigned to the R division, which was the repair division. And I think I had 25 guys, listed guys, that all of a sudden I was the boss. Very interesting.
How old were you?
At 22.
Okay.
So there I was, boot ensign, 22 guys I was responsible for. The entire engineering division on a ship of this size was roughly about 100 guys. And that was between the guys that ran the engine rooms and those of us that did the repair work. Now, it's always interesting to me that the Navy gave our division, repair division, to a guy with a degree in history and economics. The Navy has always believed this, that if you can achieve a college degree, you can probably do a lot of things. So really the prime criteria for being an officer in the United States Navy is a college degree. So anyway, I survived. I think the first thing I developed on board ship was a very healthy and loving respect for the enlisted troops that worked for me. I mean, I had chief petty officers, that's E7s, and these guys had fought in World War II. And tremendous intelligence. I had one guy who was an electrician's mate, and in another world, this guy was easily an MIT graduate. He just easily could have been that in a different set of circumstances. Super guy. On the beach, I double dated with him. Active duty stuff. We had two unique things to naval vessels at that point. We had a height finding radar, so we could track not alone the parallel path of an aircraft, but we could also see how high it was. And that was kind of unique for those days. And there weren't that many destroyers that were so equipped. So for a bit, we were an extension of the DEW line, which is another story. Let me get to, we also had installed someplace along the line a rather sophisticated sonar. So one of our tasks was to patrol the area between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, monitoring Soviet submarines, which was interesting. The crossing of the Atlantic is also kind of nice, and we did that any number of times. But being at sea in the North Atlantic, and I just have to say, just visualize a 3 or 4 story building, and that's the kind of seas you're encountering. So you'd be at the top of a wave, at the crest of a wave, and you'd have to get down the side of the wave, get into the trough, and turn around and go back up before the next wave came down and could theoretically tip you over. Interesting experiences.
Were you ever scared?
Yeah, yeah. Going downhill, and also we would probably roll from upwards of 32 degrees. I think 35 was max. We went over at 35 degrees, and we went up around in the 30s, 31, 32.
That had to be rough.
Well, it was, yeah. I got seasick for about the first day, and after that, it wasn't a problem. But when the seas are as rough as that, you expend all of your energy holding on so you don't fall down. So kind of interesting. But we had some nice fun chasing Russian merchantmen because we didn't find too many submarines, and we operated out of Greenock, Scotland, which is actually just south of, or rather west of Glasgow. So we operated out of the Firth of Clyde, and saw a fair amount of the Irish Sea. So in terms of the total time I spent on active duty, I got as far north as Gentian, Newfoundland, as far south as Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and as far east as Copenhagen, Denmark.
Wow.
And
Did you go to Haiti?
Say again?
Did you dock in Haiti at all?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah.
So
Wouldn't want to go back, and I don't bet it's changed a bit since the time I was there.
I think that's even rough.
61, 62.
Yeah. Wow.
And two things that, well, three things happened whilst I was 3 years active duty on this destroyer. The Bay of Pigs fiasco occurred, the Berlin Wall went up, and the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred. And when the missile crisis occurred in October of 62, at that point, we've been monitoring the coast of Cuba. We would operate about 7 miles off Cuba, monitoring aircraft because we had this special height finding radar. And if an aircraft went over that wasn't between, let's say, 32,000 feet and 36,000 feet, we'd call the Air Force, and the Air Force in Miami would send out a fighter plane to see what was going on. In all cases, it was generally a commercial aircraft that had gone astray, either too high or too low.
Didn't you also bring in Cuban refugees?
Yeah. The Cuban underground anti-Castro forces knew where we were and where we were operating. So we picked up on a number of occasions boatfuls of Cuban refugees. And these wooden craft had enough freeboard of about 1 foot, and freeboards the distance between the water level and the top of the gunnel. So a foot of freeboard, and the sails were canvas sacks sewed together. And it took them, we could pick them up on radar at about 12 miles, and it would take them the better part of half a day to get the 12 miles to us. We'd load them on the fantail, put them under armed guard with a shotgun, no shells in the shotgun, call the Coast Guard in Miami, and the Coast Guard would send a vessel out, and we would transfer the Cuban refugees to the Coast Guard vessel. Coast Guard takes them into Miami. And I've got to believe that Little Havana or Little Cuba in Miami probably came about by what we were doing and what other vessels were similarly doing.
That's a wonderful story. No,
Very interesting.
yeah, that's a wonderful
You
story.
can well imagine I had no love whatsoever for anybody
Okay.
who recognizes Cuba.
Yeah,
I've got
okay.
too much with it.
How about you, Gina?
Well, I went in 2002. I was active duty for 6 years. So from 02 to 08, and my first assignment was at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Oh,
So
it's popular.
people always think it's quite interesting because, as I said, I was in a med technician, or a medic, as people know them by, and you just assume that when you join the military, everything's combat medicine, but I actually was assigned to the labor and delivery unit at the hospital in Mississippi. So
Oh, nice.
a couple of years was with just moms and babies when I was in the Air Force. And then I actually was stationed there during Hurricane Katrina. So our base had quite a bit of damage done to it. And I was reassigned, and I actually got to choose where I wanted to go. And I'm from Massachusetts, so I came up to Hanscom, and again was assigned to not your typical military assignment, but I was in the pediatrics clinic here at Hanscom. And after about a year of doing that, I had another friend, another medic in the building, who came down, and she said that there was a deployment to Afghanistan, and it was a volunteer opportunity, and she thought it would be something that we should try to do together. At the time, we were 22 and didn't really have any ties to anyone or any place. So I said, yeah, let's do it. So we volunteered, and they sent us to Fort Bragg for training. And she actually got hurt while we were at training. She was fine, but got hurt enough that they sent her home. So I ended up over in Afghanistan without her. And the whole plan was that we were going to go together. So I was in Afghanistan for a year. I was on a provincial reconstruction team, and I was assigned to a forward operating base in Jalalabad, Afghanistan, and was there for a year and came back to Hanscom after that, and just finished up 6 years and got out.
Wow.
So, kind of a little bit of everything during 6 years, and Hurricane Katrina and deployment. And, I was in tech school when they declared war, when, the United States declared war. So it was certainly an interesting time to be brand new to the military.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you go into a medic career?
Going in or afterwards, do you mean?
Yeah. I mean, with all that experience working in the hospital, seems to me to have been a natural for you to say, okay, I'm going into nursing or doctor or whatever.
Right. So I actually had gone into nursing school when I got out, and we were still moving around. My husband was still active duty military. And so when I was in nursing school, he ended up getting orders and we had to move. So I had to leave the program, back to Massachusetts once again. And it ended up being that a position for a veteran service officer was open, and it was just something that I was interested in doing. So I thought I would put nursing school on hold and try something new. And I've been a veteran service director for 8 years now. So certainly seems like maybe it was a good fit. And in the meantime, I did get finally finished my bachelor's degree, but not in nursing. And
that's great.
I just had a complete change of direction. Yeah, so it's all worked out really well. And I love that I'm a veteran service officer now, because I still get to hear everyone's military stories, and I get to be involved and help, my fellow veterans. So it's worked out really well for me.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Very nice to have you there. And these days, the military still pays for college, right?
Oh, they do. Yeah. So, I mean, luckily I didn't have to pay one dime for my bachelor's degree. So that was certainly, something really great and such a great benefit that I can now help other people sign up to and make sure that they get their education benefits and everything else that they need as well.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
Mhm.
Do all that.
Let me chime in for a sec, that one of the benefits of my term on active duty was at that point, the Cold War GI Bill. So as a result, I got an MBA thanks to the United States government.
Yeah.
And Bill had already gotten through college and so forth. Yeah, that's a nice thing. What was Afghanistan like?
I mean, it was certainly an interesting year. I grew up a lot. As I said, I was in labor and delivery and pediatrics medicine up until I went to Afghanistan. So right before going to Afghanistan, I went through an Army course, actually combat medic advanced skills training, to sort of switch gears and learn combat medicine.
Wow.
Luckily, I didn't have to use too much of that knowledge while I was over there. While we were there, we were just sort of traveling around the province, and we were reaching out to different villages, and we had supplies and all sorts of different type of aid that we could offer each of the villages. So it was a really positive mission while I was there.
That sounds
Did a
it.
lot of good for the people that lived in that area. So it was a very rewarding experience, and I was only 22. So like I said, I mean, I definitely grew up quite a bit over that 1 year in Afghanistan, and still just super thankful for the opportunity, and it changed my life. So, and for the better.
And it's so nice to hear somebody say going to Afghanistan was a rewarding opportunity. I mean, I don't think you would hear that as much. This is wonderful to hear.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, it's certainly a dangerous place, or at the time, especially at the time, there was a lot of things going on. But the things that we were doing over there were producing positive results. And so, I was grateful for that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I remember when my son was in Iraq, his sister and I would collect all the Halloween candy, and they would be handing it out to the Iraqi children, probably wrecking their teeth. But it was just something positive that could be done at that point, and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay, other dangerous spots. Peter, were you ever in what you consider danger, or Bill?
Well, Iceland was in 1954 when I arrived, was celebrating their 3rd anniversary as being independent from Denmark. They did not particularly care for the Americans, and it was pretty heavily leaning towards communism. And as a result, we were restricted to the base. The reason that the Army was there was to provide security for NATO oil storage facilities, which were nothing more than huge tank farms that were taken over from the Germans. They had their U-boat fleets refueling in Iceland all the time. The fjords were quite deep, and the big facility that we were quite concerned about was Qualifjorda, which when you translate it, turns out to be Bay of Whales. And at that time, there was still whale processing going on at that point. And when it was the season, indeed, everyone that was on guard duty had to wear gas masks. The smell was absolutely that bad. Getting there itself was an adventure. I understand now there's a beautiful highway that just circumvent the entire Icelandic island. However, when we were there, it was single lane dirt roads with certain spots where you could pull over if you saw someone coming in the opposite direction.
Oh, lovely.
And with a convoy of 5 or 6 trucks, all of a sudden, somebody with leanings other than towards the US would pull out with a automobile or truck, which meant that we were under instructions to have to back up.
Oh.
And when you're backing a truck up, that you've got the 2 rear wheels with a 4 wheels on your rear axles, and 2 of them are hanging off the road to begin with. It takes a little while.
I bet it
So
does.
while the trip to Qualifjorda would be only about a 2-hour trip north, it sometimes would take as much as 5 and 6 hours because you had a little bit of traffic that you had to contend with. Incidentally, one of the reasons that I really enjoyed Iceland was that the mean temperature was to the 10th of a degree, the same as that of Philadelphia. We were warmed by the
Geysers?
you know,
Geysers.
Yeah, and in the wintertime, the biggest piece of snow fighting equipment they had on Keflavik Air Force Base was a road grader. The temperature, as I said, a 10th of a degree to that of Philadelphia. It was 68 in the summertime, and it went down to about 25 in the wintertime. It would, a storm in the winter would start out as snow like we have here, it turn over to rain, but we would have winds often up to 135, 140 miles an hour. We had real hurricane force winds.
Ooh,
And
that's more than hurricane force. That's really bad.
a friend of mine was a helicopter pilot in Iceland, and he was out from time to time having to rescue people off of fishing boats. And when he came back to the States, he was stationed at Otis. And I no sooner got back, and he was in the headlines for having saved somebody on a boat someplace in the storm. And they said, well, where'd you get that kind of experience? Well, I was in Iceland. You do it all the time.
Oh, wow. Wow. What about you, Peter?
But going back to the communists, there was a little bit of an uprising in Reykjavik, and I had spent some time, my big duty, because I got transferred from the infantry to the Air Force because of knowing the base personnel officer. My big responsibility was to make certain that there were 2 kegs of Heineken beer every day in the enlisted men's club, and the officers club would have just 1 keg. So I would go from time to time over to help collect the beer. So this one uprising came along, and because I had not had any real training with alerts on the base, they said, oh, take a machine gun platoon and go and report to the captain at the U.S. Embassy in Reykjavik, and they'll tell you what to do. That indeed got a little bit on the frightening side. Where do we put the machine guns? So we had set up there for the better part of 3-4 days because of what was going on. Turns out nothing happened, but we were in position should something.
But you saved the beer?
Pardon?
You saved the beer, huh?
Yeah, well, but they kept getting the beer. The one thing that was important about the beer, oftentimes, the base would be closed because of the winds, etc. But the Navy Navy pilots were there. They were watching the Russian fishing fleet. And those guys certainly didn't want to miss their beer, so they would volunteer to go over regardless, base closed or not, it didn't make any difference. Navy kept the beer.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, if any of the audience out there, which seems to have grown while we've been talking, have any questions, please ask them, because we're only going to go on for about another 15 minutes. But Peter, have you had any exciting adventures? You mentioned the Bay of Pigs. Were you involved there?
Not involved with the Bay of Pigs, nor with the Berlin Wall going up, just that we were on heightened alert because of those two incidents. I'll offer you two more thoughts of things. For those of us who have gone down to the sea in ships, your greatest enemy is the sea. And that's a common enemy, whether you're a seafarer for whatever nation or what have you. That's a prime concern and something which you develop a whale of a big respect for rather quickly. Second incident, we were tied up in Key West, Florida, in the same basin where Harry Truman had his summer home. Well, we got a message. I had the duty. Keep in mind that a naval vessel, when it's in port, 2/3 of the crew can leave, go on the beach and do their thing, but 1/3 has to stay on board, and you have to keep a nucleus of officers there in case the ship has to go to sea in an emergency. Well, we got a secret encrypted message saying, stand by to get underway immediately, high alert, US about to go to war. So we did the necessary things and sent a few guys over on the beach to get the rest of the officers, including the captain and the rest of the crew on board. We warmed up the engine so we were ready to go. Lines were all singled up. And then we got a follow-up message saying, unfortunately, we forgot to preface this message with, this is a drill, this is a drill.
Oh, you must have been annoyed.
Well, and while this was all going on for about 4 to 6 hours, we're in Key West and we're looking north toward Miami, expecting to see the great mushroom cloud going up over Miami Beach.
Yeah.
Interesting time.
Yeah, yeah. Gina? I don't know that you would, from what you've said, your life would be different than this, yes?
In terms of, are you still referring to dangerous times or?
Any dangerous. As a mother, you always, my child is going into the military, will he come back?
Right.
But what you've described so far, they have described so far, it was an interesting time. They learned a lot. It was a different story.
Well, I mean, there were certainly a few times that were quite dangerous in Afghanistan. I mean, but for me being there for 1 year, and a few instances that were scary, I feel like that was a win, that it was just a couple of times and not, prolonged or regular occurrences while I was there. So, so I certainly there were some times, but not too many.
Would you recommend to a young woman to go, if she could go to Afghanistan or in the military?
I mean, I certainly am all for joining the military, whether you're a man or a woman. I think, I think it's such a great experience, and the benefits that you get from it as well afterwards are wonderful. And yeah, I think that you learn a lot. And I think whether you go in enlisted or as an officer, you learn a lot. It changes who you are as a human being. So I'm totally in support of anyone who is thinking about doing it. And I'll just plug that the Air Force is definitely the way to go. Sorry, everyone. I'm biased, but I loved the Air Force. So
well, I know the bill switched over halfway through up there. And
see,
yeah. You do switch over. Now, I mentioned earlier, let's see, we don't have any questions. I
think there is, sorry, Ashley, I do think there is a question, actually, if you want me to read it.
Yeah, there's one in the Q&A.
I can, it's actually
it's from Gresh. What most important lesson did you use for the rest of your life in the military service? That's very close to what I was going to ask. So the perfect final question. What most important lesson? Who would like to go first on that?
I'm
Can
game.
go. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
The going to OCS, one of the things that was sort of ingrained into it in terms of your relationship with the enlisted troops was to be fair, to be firm, and to be friendly, the 3 Fs. Secondly, is to tell your guys, so to speak, what to do, but not how to do it. And thirdly, if you're an officer, remember you are always the boss. You may not always be right, but in fact, you are always the boss. I've taken those 3 things and I think you can apply them to a work situation in civilian life, certainly in the military. I think you can apply it to family life. I think it can apply it to business relationships, and I think you can apply it in a volunteer setting. So I would say those are the 3 things that I was fortunate enough to gain from the United States Navy.
Thank you. Gina?
Well, being,
Yeah.
Oh, either you or Bill, one of you go.
I'll go for just a minute. I find that today's young people take for granted with life in the United States and how easy it might be, etc. But you've heard it so many times, freedom is not free. And being in the service, be it an officer or an enlisted man, you do learn indeed that you are very fortunate to be providing security for your family, your nation, and I really think that there's an opportunity for everyone that to go into the service. I had no misgivings about going. I think that the draft, which has long since gone by, certainly had its place, and I would really like to see it come back. I really think that the youth today needs to learn how to appreciate America.
Thank you. And Gina?
I guess I would say, the Air Force has core values, and those are integrity first and service before self and excellence in all we do. And those are just those 3 things were just ingrained in us when we were in the Air Force. And I think that they're all things that you can take with you later on. And certainly service before self is something that I think I can resonate with. I mean, I really do love being in a position where I can help others career-wise. So I just try to take all 3 of those things that I learned in the Air Force and use them every day. And there's certainly always an opportunity for integrity or to do the very best you can at anything you're doing. So I would say the Air Force core values for me.
Thank you. That's a great way of ending this program. I thank you all for joining us today. And do remember, thank you, Matt, the Veterans Car Parade on Wednesday, November 11th. You are going to see many veterans. We think we're even going to have some from World War II that day. So do join us. And thank you very much, Gina Rada, Bill Mix, and Peter Lund.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you everyone
Bye.
for attending.